What if the problem with our politics is also the problem with our workplaces? Our inability to truly see the people around us, keeping us from doing anything meaningful. They're far right, far left, too hardline, too accommodating, stupid, evil, the problem. Their account, creative, production, legal, stupid, clueless, the problem. What if us versus them became, what can I learn from someone I disagree with? Wilk Wilkinson is trying to make this what if real with his podcast Derate the Hate, as an advisor to the ProHuman Foundation, and in his role as Director of Media Operations at Braver Angels. The key is focusing on shared purpose, something I find a lot of common ground on when I talk with folks I disagree with politically, and something that workplaces need to do a much better job of creating. What was the purpose at most of the ad agencies I've worked at? No idea. And that's a problem. I invite each listener to start by getting clear on your own purpose in life and at work. Why do you show up each day? What would the best day look like? What would the worst? Once you answer those questions, start talking to the folks around you. And more importantly, start listening. Welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast, the show where we cut through the BS and find ways to make work more fun, more human, and less ridiculous. All of which makes your business more profitable, by the way. Today's episode is a part of the ProHuman Series in partnership with the ProHuman Foundation, where Wilk is an advisor. If you enjoy this one, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Wilk. Okay, Wilk Wilkinson, welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Hey, TJ, it's great to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I want to give you a chance before we dig into anything too deeply, just to introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about what you do for work, how you came to be doing it.
Yeah, so I'm Wilk Wilkinson, host of the Derate the Hate podcast and Director of Media Systems and Operations for Braver Angels, which is America's largest grassroots cross-partisan organization promoting courageous citizenship and bridging divides. I just came into that role recently, TJ, out of a 26-year career in trucking and transportation. So I was a blue-collar guy most of my adult life. Then I transitioned into operations management. At the beginning of the pandemic, started a podcast talking about mindset, which kind of gravitated into depolarization work. And Braver Angels was an organization that I was doing a lot of volunteer work with for the last several years. Yeah, and they asked me if I'd come on and come on to their staff and start taking over their media operations and build out some media systems and things like that. So here I am. It's nice. A dream come true. Actually, it's something I think everybody that gets an opportunity to make a living doing something that they're very passionate about is a blessed person. So I count myself as a very blessed person.
I love that, and it makes me wonder. Given you've had this kind of varied career journey, right now where you are, what role is work playing in your life?
The role that work is playing in my life now is something entirely different than I had been used to in my life. Like I said, as a truck driver, I spent a lot of my time on the road, and I've always been somebody, TJ, who works a lot. I'm not somebody who has a definitive line of where my job ends and my life begins. I've always kind of blended the two. I've been somebody who's worked round the clock without punching a clock for several decades. My role now is something entirely different than I was ever used to before, because now I actually get a lot more time to see my family. I work in my home office, except for when I'm traveling for speaking and engagements and gigs and things like that. But so as a part of my life, right now my job or my career that I'm building out with Braver Angels is, while it's heavily embedded and ingrained within my personal life, I get a lot more personal time with my family. So
Nice.
I don't know if that fully answers your question, TJ, but
yeah.
But I would say I mark that up again in that column of being a very blessed man. I get to spend a lot more time with my family.
Yeah, I mean, I think it answers it perfectly. I mean, I think what I'm always curious about and why I often ask that question is just, work, finding a way to balance or integrate work into our lives is a challenge for a lot of people. And for some folks, they skew real hard one way or the other. Like, I work so much, I never see my family, or I really try to make so much time for my family that I'm wondering if I'm sacrificing something on the work end. And it sounds like you've found a pretty sweet spot where you're doing stuff you love and getting to put a lot of passion into that. And part of the blessing is that you get to also spend a lot of time with your family.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, for several years, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. For several years, I sacrificed a lot of my family time for my regular career and my podcast slash altruistic kind of volunteer work that I was doing. So I almost had two careers. And while part of that was being done at home and I very much incorporated all that into my family life, I sacrificed a lot of my time with my family over the past several years to kind of get where I'm at. But now, like I said, now I'm reaping the rewards for that because I now get to dedicate a lot of my time to my purpose and passion career-wise and my purpose and passion family-wise. So there's a much greater balance now than there really ever has been.
Nice. What was the suckiest work experience you had?
Oh man. I will tell you that like I said, I spent a large portion of my adult life as a blue collar guy.
Yeah.
And there was a number of different things, TJ, when I was trying to transition from being the driver and the guy that's beating myself senseless every day doing physical backbreaking work to getting into an office environment and trying to use my brains rather than brawn and things like that. And I could name so many different things that really sucked in the stages of my career.
Yeah.
But I think, there was a couple situations where as I was trying to make that transition, kind of got hoodwinked, was made promises that were not, brought to fruition and just treated very poorly along the way. I turned those into things that I could learn from and try to better myself from. But we can get into that a little bit deeper if you choose to. But it's kind of a longer story.
Yeah, well, let's come back to that because I do think it's those moments sometimes that are the ones that help folks who are in it see a way out, right? Yeah. Because when you're in it and when you were in it, I imagine at some points it's like, what is the way out here? What am I going to do? So yeah, I mean, if you're open to it, I'd love to dig into that a little more. Like what were you facing? What were you feeling? And what ultimately helped you kind of find your way through?
Yeah, well, here's what I'll say about that because, like I said, I was trying to transition and make that transition. I was with a company I'd been with for quite a long time. Yeah. I was made some promises by people who maybe just didn't even have the authority to make the promises that were being made, but ultimately, what it came down to was I thought I was going to be taking a position that I ended up not taking. I mean, and didn't even find out about it, honestly, until hours before that transition was supposed to be happening.
Okay.
And this, in my mind at the time, was like a real career transition, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's just like all of a sudden somebody else shows up and they're sitting at the desk that I was supposed to be taking over, and I'm like, what is going on? And apparently there was a conversation that happened that I didn't even know happened.
Wow.
So I don't want to get too much more into that, TJ, but I will say this about that was I was so angry at the time.
Yeah.
And I felt so betrayed. I felt so angry. And at the time I was not the person then that I am now, and I did not react well to things, nearly as well to things then that I do now. But there was something inside me that says, you know what? Maybe this is happening for a reason. Maybe there's something bigger at play here. Let's just kind of sit back and see how things go. And in the events that happened in the coming months, I ended up leaving. I ended up leaving that not that company. I ended up having to transfer with that company from Florida to Minnesota because of some health issues with my folks, and then there happened to be a truck driving position up here that worked out for me. So everything did kind of work out, and then a number of years later, I did end up transferring with that company into a management position. Yeah. So I will say that while in the moment, it was one of the worst gut punches. I mean, just like bag over the head, punch in the face kind of things I had ever experienced in my life.
Yeah.
But in that moment where I was able to hold myself together and look at a bigger picture and then actually play out that bigger picture over the next several years, it really turned into, TJ, I'm not going to lie, it turned into one of the best things that could have happened in reality. And so I would just say that people, while in the moment, there's an awful lot of things that we just don't understand, but having the emotional intelligence to grasp the idea that there's probably something bigger at hand. Yeah. And let it play out for a while. Don't make rash judgments. Don't make big decisions. Never allow your emotions to dictate your actions. It's one of the models that I live by. But in our professional lives especially, we often have to think that maybe there's something bigger at play here. Maybe there's something bigger at play with the company, with whatever God you believe in, the universe, whatever it is. Step back, kind of let things cool down and see where things play out. Maybe it is a situation where you have to leave, but it's for me, I will tell you, it worked out the way that it needed to work out.
Yeah. And I like what you said there about, being able to see the bigger picture and allow it to play out. And what I hear in that a little is trust that you will be okay. Trust that you will find your way through in that. That's what I think at first might feel the hardest. It's like, can I do this? And to just put a little faith in yourself and put a little faith in whatever else, like you said, you put faith in, that you will see it will emerge for you. Yeah. That can be tough, but that's a big move to make. Yeah.
It is a big move. It's again, we go to the idea of personal accountability, emotional intelligence, just being able to kind of step outside yourself for a minute and say, let's not make any rash decisions. Let's see how this plays out for a minute. And oftentimes, when you allow your cooler head to prevail, things work out a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. That cooler head feels pretty far away sometimes when you're in the thick of it.
Well, it does. I mean, you got to think about it, right? The average full-time work week in this country, or typical, you think of 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. We're talking about 2,080 hours a week that people spend at their job. I mean, that's more than, kind of going back to your idea, TJ, of how does your job play into your life, your personal life. A lot of people don't get to spend 2,080 hours a week with their spouse, their kids. I mean, maybe collectively or aggregate they do. Yeah. But a lot of times we spend the majority of our life year over year in the workplace. And when things in the workplace, feel like that bag over the head punch in the face, it is one of the hardest things that we'll do to keep our head, keep our head in that moment, make the right decision, not fly off the handle and do something the wrong way. But I would just say it's very important that we try to do our best to make the better decision.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. But yeah, you bring up a good point, which is just the fact that work takes up so much of our life, I think warrants that we spend a little time thinking about it and paying attention to it, and occasionally stepping back and going, am I doing something that is serving me and that is serving what I want to serve? Am I doing something that I can feel good about? Because when we don't, well, that night just bleeds into the rest of our lives. And suddenly, we're not showing up how we need to anywhere. So I think sometimes we can dismiss a job as just a job. It's like, okay, well, half of my life is just half of my life, I guess. That's a tough thing to really look at,
Yeah, well, it is. It's so tough because, okay, so if we think about those, going back to my transportation career, TJ, I think about it, and as a driver, maybe when I was a local driver, maybe not over the road driver, it's a totally different dynamic. But okay, as a driver, as an employee, you finish your work day, you throw your keys on the counter, hang them on the board, whatever you're doing, right? You go home, you don't have to think about that till you punch in the next day and start doing your pre-trip. Yeah. As a manager, it's a totally different thing where now all of a sudden you're on call for after hours because you've got drivers doing things like that. There's a different dynamic there, and I've played both roles, but trying to separate the time that you're on the clock, figuratively or not, on the clock from when you're at home and with your family, a lot of times putting that away, hanging your keys up mentally as well as physically, it's not the easiest thing to do. So how much time outside of that 2,080 hours a year are we letting what happened while we're on the clock affect how we are showing up now at home? And so that's always a thing too that people need to think about, and it's a harder thing to think about, but really it comes down to how we can, as human beings, as an individual, act instead of react, not reacting badly to things that are outside of our control, but being proactive in how we show up when we need to show up for ourselves, for our family, things like that. It's definitely a mindset and a paradigm that people need to think about.
Yeah, and that brings me to kind of some of the work you're doing now. I mean, things like emotional intelligence and mindset shifts and all that stuff. I mean, how did you start getting into that space? You mentioned you started your podcast, and it started as kind of this mindset thing, but evolved into this depolarization kind of conversation. I mean, what pulled you into that, and what have you learned about yourself and about dealing with others as part of the process?
Yeah, TJ, I spent so much of my life so angry. I had so much anger and animus about things from my past and things. Well, it was very, very difficult each day for me at one point in my life it was hard to get out of bed. It was hard to focus on anything other than just being mad. And I was just a miserable human being that really there was very little joy in my life. I found ways to criticize just about everything. It was just tough getting through day after day after day. And one day I was thinking about it, and I don't even know if it was one day or if it was a gradual process, but the reality is I just kept on coming back to what is the common denominator in all of my pain, all of my misery, all of the things that just keep me in this pit of misery. And the common denominator was me. And when I started thinking about and actually studying and reading books about mindset and how we basically interact with the world around us and how we let me just say this. I'm a very freedom loving guy. And there was one line. Now, there's several books that I read, and I can talk about, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, or Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or Viktor Frankl's A Man for Meaning, or whatever. I mean, just dozens and dozens of books that really stand out to me as hugely important in my own transformation. But when I read A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and he's talking about laying on the table and these Nazi doctors doing horrible things to his body, but then he says the ultimate freedom, the one thing that they could not take away is my mind and how I was going to react to the things that were outside of my control.
Right.
And I got to thinking about that, TJ, and I'm like, I'm a miserable human being. Day in and day out, I wake up mad, and I'm not going through nearly what he went through. And if he can do that, if he can keep that frame of mind and talk about the ultimate freedom is his ability to choose how he's going to react to those things outside of his control, then I can too. And I started putting that together again with so many other things that I had read and listened to and just kind of started to experience. But another thing that happened, TJ, that was even bigger than that. When I started to think that way and start working through those, like I said, a big paradigm shift, I started to look at the world differently. I started to experience the world differently. I started to show up differently in situations that I would have otherwise, just been very angry about or dealt with in the wrong way or whatever. And so the more I did it, the easier it became. And the easier it became, eventually it became natural.
Right.
And I think it's a huge part of what people discount as being possible in their own lives. And in the job that they have or whatever, we talked about, again, desuckify work, right? How do we make work not suck? Well, a lot of jobs are just going to suck.
Right.
But a lot of that comes back to, how are we going to react to it? How are we going to think about it at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, do we go to work thinking my day is going to suck?
Right.
Or do we go to work thinking, you know what, 8 hours and then the rest of the day is mine? I am going to sail. This is going to be a beautiful day and nothing's going to take that away from me. And even if this 8 hours is bad, the rest of my day is going to be beautiful. Let's do it. And it really comes down to the mindset.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, Frankl's book is amazing. I read that not that long ago, maybe the last year or two. And it's hard not to put things in perspective when you read a book like that. But I think to your point, there's been, I don't know if this is a real study or if it's just a story, but there was a story about 3 people who have basically the same job within a hospital. They're basically a janitor in a hospital. Yeah. And they asked them how they feel about their job. And one person basically says they hate it. The other person says, it's a job. And the other person says they love it. And they go deeper. And what they realize is the person who hates it is kind of coming from that point of view that you were describing, which is like, this sucks. I clean bedpans. I mop up people's vomit, blah, blah, blah. It just sucks. And every day is confirmation of that. Another person does a little bit of the let me just kind of block this out. It's 8 hours. I can get through it. It's fine. It's a job. I get paid. It's all right. And so they have kind of that middle experience. And then the other person goes, yeah, well, the way they described their job was something along the lines of I help contribute to people getting healthier. And by bringing that mindset into the workplace, even when they're cleaning a bedpan, they're able to appreciate the work they're doing because they see it as part of that bigger picture, right? And so now they're suddenly a piece of this beautiful story, which is we help people feel better so that they can go back to living their lives. And this is my part in it, as opposed to I clean a bedpan and therefore my job sucks. So same experience. It's all the story we tell ourselves up here. So I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And I wonder, in the work you do, I'm a fan of the work Bravery Angels does. I've definitely followed you guys for a while. And I've also, involved at the ProHuman Foundation. I follow a lot of them, and I've interviewed some other folks from there. I know you're an advisor there.
Yeah.
This mindset shift, it's one thing when it's about ourselves and the story we tell ourselves, but now you're talking about we're bringing it into conversation with others, right? And anybody who's got their eyes even slightly open has seen what the last 10 or 15 years has looked like in terms of our ability to communicate with each other, social media, politics, hot button issues, and that even shows up in the workplace a lot. What do you see helps? Is it the same mindset shift, or is there more we need to be doing so that we can have the conversations with people that are not immediately like, I hate you, but I see you and I'm curious about you. What do we need to do to get there?
Yeah, so that's the $1 million question, TJ, because one of the hardest things that we will ever do is to really learn to listen to people that we know going into that conversation are diametrically opposed to us on many things, and sometimes things that are very personal and passionate to us.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to say, okay, I'm going to go in and listen with intention. It's a skill set that not everybody has, but I think that most people can learn.
Yeah.
And it really, what it does is you have to start with the idea that I can be pretty well sure that I will be listened to if I am listening with intention to them. So that's where the courage really comes in, because sometimes we have to listen to things that are going to make us very uncomfortable in order for others to listen to us.
Yeah.
Because it's a reciprocal thing.
Yeah.
And it is tough, especially for people. I mean, I'll go back to kind of who I was in my past life, somebody who was very angry, somebody who would get triggered by many things, political or societal or whatever. And having to listen, or trying to force myself to listen to people without wanting to just focus on responding, but having having the desire to truly understand where that person comes from. A lot of that starts with understanding humanity. And you talked about my friends at the ProHuman Foundation, and the concept that we all have to start with a pro-human footing, realizing that we are all unique individuals, but our humanity is what we share. Yeah. We all have, I can say words like all, but I mean, maybe there's some anecdotal exception, but the reality is we all have the ability to feel compassion for our fellow human beings. Yeah. We all have the ability to love. We have the ability to hurt. We want similar things. We want food for our belly, water to drink, a shelter when when there's storms, and a warm bed to sleep in at night, and a safe environment for our kids and things like that. The reality is when we start with that pro-human footing, TJ, and say we may not have anything else in common, but at least we have that. Yeah. And if we start with that, and we start with the idea that we're going to enter this conversation with providing people with the dignity that at least that deserves. And now I am going to enter this conversation saying that I am going to listen with the intention to understand and not simply respond. Yeah. Now we've got a place to start. And at the end of that conversation, there may be no common ground. Yeah. There may be no common ground. We can't get there. Now, oftentimes there is. I would say more often than not, there is some common ground. But even if at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, that is all we have, we still have our humanity, and we walk away from that conversation a better person for it. Because I didn't attack them, and they didn't attack me, because we have our shared humanity. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, couple things came up there that I think are interesting. One of which is the ability to be okay with there not being common ground. I think sometimes, at least in sort of modern life, that feels like a challenge. And I'm not exactly sure what that is, if it's related to identity or what, but it's like being fully aware that somebody, whether they're literally like across the table from me or through a screen, has these views that are sort of diametrically opposed to mine. Like there's a weird pain in that. There's like a loneliness in that it's like, God, like, and it can block that sense of common humanity, right? When it's like, wow, just like everything that they're saying is not what I believe. What helps us come back to the common humanity part of that story, even as we're listening and, people are talking about the hottest button issues you can think of, whether it's abortion or immigration or whatever it is, the things that, you talk about the workplace, like DEI or something like that, like, that gets people going, right? What have you found is helpful, like in terms of just grounding yourself back in the recognition that all of this stuff, that is not all of who they are. At their core is that thing we share. Right. And again, this is a very a tougher and deeper question. Yeah. But you said something right there at the end that I think is really, really important. Is this who they are? I mean, because too much, and you talked in kind of like the beginning of this part of the conversation about what has happened over the last several years that has kind of changed things. Yeah. And a lot of what has happened, and you and I are probably similar in age or close, but we remember a time when not everything was made political. Yeah. Not everything was made into a national issue. Politics wasn't part of every conversation. Yeah. Because something happened along the way where people started to make their political identity part of their core identity. Agreed. Yeah. And now every time something happens with the other side, politics is a wide spectrum,
Yeah.
but we've narrowed it down to like two teams, and if they got that jersey on, then whatever they say, they're not simply wrong, but they're evil.
Yeah.
Or they're stupid.
Yeah.
But so when somebody disagrees with something that we believe in politically, and we have internalized that as being part of our core identity, now it feels like they are attacking us rather than attacking the position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which makes it a lot harder, right? Because now we're put on the defensive. Now we're put on the defensive. So we talk about, if we break it down like issue by issue and things that are harder to talk about in public or in mixed company, whether it be DEI or abortion or immigration to a certain extent and things like that. One of the realities is number one, it should never be considered a zero-sum game, because there's always, it's never going to be completely black or white. There's always going to be a very small percentage of people over here that believe, they're absolutists on this, and these people over here are absolutists on this. But there's a wide range of nuanced perspectives in between.
Yeah.
And we'll never understand that wide range of nuanced perspectives unless we involve ourselves in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes down to the idea that maybe the person that we're speaking with has one of those hardline, fringe perspectives that is just a shock to our conscience.
Yeah.
Okay. That very well may be the case.
Mm-hmm.
That very well may be the case, but then we have to ask that person, okay, I understand, and let me make sure I understand what you are saying.
Yeah.
And if then that is correct, if I truly understand where you are at on this particular thing, may I ask you a follow-up question? May I ask you what it is about your life experience that brought you to believe the things that you believe about this particular thing?
Yeah.
Right. So then now we're not necessarily focused completely on that which shocks our conscience, but now we are diving into the person that believes that particular thing and learning why they believe it. Again, at the end of that conversation, we may not be able to agree with them or find any common ground on the position itself, but at least we better understand how that human being came to believe what they believe.
Yeah. 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 And that, at least as I hear it, is, it takes away some of the judgment, because it now opens your eyes to the why behind it. And you can kind of go, okay, I can see how you are where you are, in the same way that I am where I am because of my own experiences. And I want to come back to this idea of identity a little bit, because this is we've been in this world of things like identity politics and identity, whether it's your political identity, your racial identity, your gender, sexuality, There's a lot of talk around identity and that really meaning something to people. And on one level, I think good, meaning it's good to have a sense of identity and who we are. But at times what it feels like is those are ways of putting walls up around ourselves with these different identities. How do you, and I know, I was looking at your bio. So your sort of identity markers that I saw were husband, father, Christian, conservative, right? So how do you hold those identities in a way that they have the meaning that they have for you, and yet they're not starting to build up a wall for anybody who maybe doesn't share those identities?
Yeah. So again, I will go back to the idea that, I will say the world is made up of all kinds of people, and as a Christian, I say, I may be just abhor the sin itself, but I love the sinner. You know, we're all made in God's image, and we're all human beings, and just because I see something that somebody's doing or the way that somebody's living or whatever as just this ugly thing that I want no part of, I will still love that sinner as my fellow human being. Because I do believe that person was made in God's image. You know, I believe a lot in forgiveness. I believe a lot in gratitude. I think there's a lot about how we, you know, look at ourselves, and then how that can translate into how we are able to accept other human beings for who they are. Again, as a Christian, I mean, I'm a sinner. I sin every single day. I'm a very imperfect and fallible man, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, I can hate the sin but love the sinner.
Yeah,
and I think that's a very important thing. When I think about identity and how people, again, going back to the idea that people have taken politics and many people have allowed politics to kind of override whatever religion it was that they had. They've made politics their religion. I think that's a very bad thing for society.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I don't worship any man. I don't worship any human being. You know, I worship God and the ideology that comes along with you know, the Christian faith and things like that. But there are people who have like I said, made politics part of their core identity, and now as the political winds shift, that Overton window kind of shifts, and there's a phrase that I'll bring up that I think, and I may be getting this wrong, but those who do not believe in anything will believe in everything. And so when we make a particular political ideology part of our core identity, and that is kind of what we in a sense worship, and as those political winds shift, then we have to change everything. We are questioning everything, and we lose trust in everything. Now, a civil society, TJ, requires a certain amount of trust in institutions, in each other, and everything else. If we start to lose trust in our fellow man, in our political institutions, in our civic institutions, in everything else, we cannot continue to function as a civil society. Because again, you know, if we believe in anything, we'll believe in nothing. If we believe in nothing, we'll believe in anything. And now everything is fluid. There's no core grounding in anything, and it's just chaos. It's anarchy. You know, this is what separates human beings from the rest of the animal kingdom.
I know. I think a lot of people are feeling that right now because the institutions are breaking down. And, you know, the tricky thing is some of our institutions didn't quite live up to their end of the bargain or haven't. But what I notice is, you know, it's kind of the throwing the baby out with the bathwater idea. It's like the very idea of institutions or traditions or anchoring pieces of civilization also getting tossed out, as opposed to saying, like, let's reform, let's reinvent some of these institutions so they serve us better. They're never going to be perfect. And I think that's part of the problem, is wanting them to be perfect. But your point about what separates us from the animals, I just think sometimes we're not aware of that. I think some people take for granted that civilization is just the default state. And it's very much the opposite of that. It's a miracle in many ways that we got to a place where civilization feels like the default state. But that sort of veneer between that and chaos is actually much thinner and closer to us than I think we like to imagine. And so we're willing to toss out some of this stuff. So I'm curious, you know, from your perspective, how do you acknowledge the failure of institutions while also acknowledging the need for them to be strong?
Another very, very tough and important question.
Yeah.
So me, if anybody's followed my work, or if they go back and look at some of my work, I was one that very early in the pandemic started speaking out against the government's response to the pandemic, and which led to a couple years later, the organization Braver Angels pairing me up with Dr. Francis Collins, former head of the NIH. And for people who maybe don't understand that, he was Dr. Fauci's boss. And so very much somebody that was integral in the government's response to the pandemic. I mean, right there in the folds of all of it. And so I'd been somebody who'd been speaking out about that response for a couple of years, built a friendship with him, still friends with him to this day. And then later, not too much later, but later became friends with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, one of the lead authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. I actually was able to kind of broker a relationship that started between the two of them, while the media continues to make them out to be arch enemies.
Wow.
Jay, or Dr. Bhattacharya, now is the current head of the NIH. Very very interesting dynamic in my life as somebody who was
you've really like been in the middle of both of those things. That's really wild. Yeah.
Right. So taking that to your question, TJ, about institutions and the importance of institutions, and how a lot of us in this country still feel betrayed by those institutions, but I'm somebody who believes strongly in the need for institutions, and more than that, not just the need for institutions. Institutions are only as good as the trust that they have and continue to garner from the citizens in this country.
Sure.
Right? Because we can have institutions all day long, but if the American people aren't going to listen to what they say, or not going to listen to their recommendations, or not going to follow their guidance, then it's all for naught. In fact, it's more damaging than it is good.
Yeah.
Our institutions in this country specifically have been built up, and while no institution is perfect, like the National Institutes of Health has been worldwide the North Star in public health research. But there was a lot of damage done there during the COVID pandemic, because of decisions that were made, backtracking on different decisions, information that was withheld, information that was suppressed, things like that. Now, with all that said, that institution still remains and should remain the world's North Star in public health research. Because if it doesn't, there will be a vacuum of leadership in the world, and that will be taken up by another institution somewhere else, most likely in China or Russia, or I mean, probably not Iran, but the reality is by actors, because make no mistake about it, these things have to happen.
Right.
There's 8.5 billion people on the planet. Public health is going to continue to be a very important need. And if we as a country do not lead as the North Star for public health for the world, somebody else will. And I don't trust them. I trust Americans to do what is right.
I'm with you on that.
So I will say this to all the people out there that say, well, these institutions are corrupt, burn them to the ground, we just need, to start over from something new. No, we do not. They are imperfect. They are all run by human beings. But I will tell you that the human beings that run these and like I said, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's leading the NIH right now, is a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And Dr. Marty McCary, who runs the FDA, and Dr. George Tidmarsh, who also works at the FDA. These are friends of mine. I know they are good people.
Yeah.
And you may disagree with some of the stuff that they've said or done or whatever. They're good people. And we still need these institutions and our government, while very, very imperfect and in my opinion, way too large, is still the best governmental system on the planet.
Right.
So the important thing for everybody to remember here is that we don't burn the system to the ground, or in your case, like you said, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because that is not going to do anybody throughout the planet, whether they're American or not. It's not going to do anybody any favors. Yeah. And the nightmarish scenario that comes after that is so much worse than what we have today. The answer, TJ, and this is for your listeners, is to become more involved. Don't be my friend Dr. Bill Doherty from Braver Angels and I were recently having a conversation. We talked about thin citizenship versus thick citizenship, and thin citizenship just being this barely, we maybe vote, we maybe don't, we don't get involved in the midterms, we don't have conversations with our representatives and things like that. But then a thick citizenship is really becoming civically engaged. How do we really learn what's going on within our communities, what's going on with our representatives, how government actually works, where we can make a difference, what civic organizations we can be part of to really make a difference. I talk a lot about the concept of subsidiarity and how we should be dealing with problems as close to the root of that problem as possible. When I was in business, it was a big part of my job to fix problems. Root cause problem solving was a big thing. I don't see a lot of that happening in our communities today. I don't see it happening it just does not happen well at all in government. But we as citizens must demand that. We the people need to be more engaged as citizens, and then we'll have trustworthy institutions. We'll have a better relationship with our representatives. We'll get better representatives. We'll get the government, because we get the government that we deserve. Make no mistake about that. We get the government that we deserve. So we cannot continue to say the institution's trash, tear it all down, we'll start with something new. No, we cannot do that. It took hundreds of years to get here. We cannot simply throw the baby out with the bathwater and pretend that we're going to turn out better tomorrow. So for the sake of all of our kids, let's fix what we've got. Let's not burn it all to the ground.
Let's not, tear it down. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think, one thing that I'm curious about, you mentioned, one of your colleagues at Braver Angels. And as I hear you discuss, how we can engage more fruitfully together as citizens, I wonder, how does that show up within the Braver Angels organization? Meaning you must have a bit of a culture of the folks who work there. And are you able to kind of sort of live up to the ideals that you're promoting outwards in terms of, I'm sure there are disagreements that come up at work and conflict and all that. How does that get managed? And are those principles turned inward on the work culture?
They really are. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. So Braver Angels, I will tell you, so Braver Angels is kind of built on the idea that leadership. Now, membership may be a different thing. Now, and again, we're a grassroots organization. Anybody can join Braver Angels. It's one of these things where we have membership all over the country. We've got 15,000 plus members, 60,000 plus people follow our different newsletters and things like that. We've got more than 124 alliances throughout the country, and most of what we've got a very small staff. and we've got a very big network. And that's made up of people of all kinds of different political persuasions, blue, red, and purple, and everything in between, right? Now, at the leadership level, whether it be like local alliances or state coordinators or things like that, there's an even split in how we do leadership.
Okay.
So if there's an alliance, in order to have an alliance, you have to have a red co-chair and a blue co-chair.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Possibly somewhere in between on that political spectrum. So there's nothing saying you can't have three co-chairs, a red, a blue, and a purple. But the reality is we try to keep the leadership in what we do as balanced as possible.
Yeah. I love that.
So that helps a lot. And then in our staff and how we do things, if we're bringing together staff, or we have a leadership committee, or we bring together a committee to work on a particular thing, we'll make sure that too is balanced politically.
Okay.
So that we're, because a big part here's the thing. Here's one of our core tenets in the Braver Angels way is to say that we all have our blind spots, but not one of us is not worth talking to. One of the best ways that we can live up to that core tenet is to say, okay, when we do something, we are going to do it in as balanced a way politically as we can possibly do it.
Yeah, I like that.
It helps to make those blind spots very evident. I mean, it's like when they came to me and asked me if I'd have a conversation with Dr. Francis Collins. I'm like, I'm rural. He's, Washington D.C. Beltway.
Yeah.
He's one of the brightest medical minds, physician scientists on the planet. I didn't graduate college.
Right.
I work with truck drivers who are, in my opinion, some of the best people on the planet. He's working with scientists and people, some of the brightest minds from around the planet every day. We don't run in similar circles, right? Yeah. And he is very pro government response to the pandemic. I was very anti government response to the pandemic.
Yeah.
But they brought us together to start having conversations with that pro-human footing right at the core of what we were doing. And we started to reveal each other's blind spots because we were so very different on so many different levels.
Yeah, I love that. And I there's a couple things I love. I love what it is, meaning I love the idea of sort of having that balance and bringing the different perspectives to reveal the blind spots. But I think on a broader level, what I really like is, as an organization, the conscious decision to structure yourselves in alignment with your values. And I think, from if I come back to the world of work, there's so much that can happen just from that. Meaning, if an organization believes in certain things and wants to achieve certain things, like, really build yourself so that you can live up to that. And I think I see so many companies struggle with living up to their values because they haven't done the hard work of actually creating that alignment in terms of how they actually show up every day. So that's a huge deal. And, one of the things I wanted to touch on briefly, just because I think it relates, at least it is in my head, so I'm curious to get your take on it. You talked about identity and sort of the firmness with which we hold that, and particularly in the political realm. And I see some of this at work sometimes. I don't know if you've seen it, but maybe you can just shed some light on this. Like, I came from the world, I worked in advertising, and we had these different teams. Like, I was on the creative team, which was writing, art direction, design. And then you would have another team that was the account services team, which was all about dealing with the clients and managing that relationship. And you had other teams, a production team, a strategy team, et cetera. And what I found, and I still find, and when I work as an executive coach with folks in that business as well as others, is there's a lot of identity we hold around our position in a place and the team we're on, to the point that in some similar ways it becomes a bit of a wall that we put around ourselves. I'm on the creative team, they're on the account services team. we're going to battle and they don't know anything and we know everything. Like that model still shows up. So in the workplace, I mean, I'm sort of envisioning that some of these same principles apply, but what one, have you seen that in your own experience? And then two, what do you think helps somebody feel the joy of being a part of a team and some of that identity, but also seeing the humanity of that other person instead of going, you're just one of them?
Right. So this is a beautiful question, and it's amazing how the parallels of the workplace and society and just how we civically engage versus how we work or professionally engage, the different parallels there, right? Yeah. So when you start talking about different teams within a corporation or whatever, and anybody who's worked in corporate America, I have, many of the people listening, I'm sure, have.
Yeah.
The different teams, not unlike different things that happen in our personal lives and things like that, start to build up the walls of their own silos. They build up the walls of their own silos, and we've all heard somebody say at some point, well, that's not my job, that's their job.
Yeah.
I wasn't responsible for that. That's right. Them.
Yeah.
All of it really comes down to us versus them.
Yeah.
So anytime we think about something, whether it be in our work life or our civic life or our family life, anything that's happening that you hear yourself or you hear somebody else kind of start talking in terms of us versus them, think about, is that really the best way to accomplish our common cause issue?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously, there's very obviously things, especially in our work life and things like that, where we don't want operations managers walking along and realizing, oh, this floor needs to be swept, so we got to because that's But ultimately, it comes down to, will they simply say, that's not my job?
Right.
That's somebody else's responsibility, not mine. Am I actually doing something to be part of the solution, or am I going to be something that furthers the problem?
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I always used to say, TJ, in my professional life, when I led people, was there's three things that I always look for. I look for coachability, accountability, and attitude, accountability, and coachability. And I could always tell, one of the first tells in having the wrong person was somebody that would simply say, well, that's not my job, it was them, or whatever. And okay, well, no, I get that, and that's fine. And the fact that you said it, though, is the bigger problem than actually thinking it.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a big deal. I think, it's not that there aren't different roles and responsibilities within a company, but it's the mindset. It comes back to that of okay, that was their job, but right now this thing needs to get done. And maybe I can do it even though it's not my job, or maybe I can help the person whose job it is to do it, or maybe I can help them see the value in it and why it matters and the impact that it has when it's not done on this team, that team, and this customer. Like you said, how can I be a part of helping to get it be done as opposed to just pointing the finger? And I think that's just such a good, simple test, like you mentioned. Just when you're in the thick of it and you're struggling with something between other departments or teams or whatever, and check your mind and go, am I going into that us versus them place? Because to your point, there's no way that's the best mindset to get to the shared goal. So check your mindset, and then try to remember, what is the shared goal here again? And how can I contribute? And how can I help others contribute? That feels like where you want to go, you know?
That's absolutely right. What is our common cause goal, and how can I be part of the success in getting there?
Yeah. So I'm curious. I hear all this work you're doing, and I'm wondering, like, what mark are you wanting to leave on the world with the work you're doing?
Yeah. That's again just another fantastic question. So, you know, when my kids ask what I do or whatever, I say I'm trying to fix a world that I didn't break. You know, ultimately, it comes down to this. I spent a lot of my life, like I said, and we talked about it early in this conversation, TJ, being miserable, not being part of the solution.
Yeah.
But certainly, if not being part of the problem, probably getting in the way of those that were trying to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
And the reality is this. I see the way that we civically engage as broken. I see our politics as broken. I see a lot of people out there that are hurting very badly. Some of them withdraw. Some of them lash out.
Yeah.
Some of them just become completely depressed. Some of them become angry. What I hope to do, TJ, is try to leave a world for my kids that is much better than what I see it as today.
Yeah.
You know, I started this podcast, the Derate the Hate podcast, several years ago now, with the idea that we would better the world one attitude at a time. It's kind of like eating an elephant. We can't, if we look at the whole thing, it's just way too overwhelming. It'd just be a daunting task. But if we talk about it one attitude at a time, and maybe whoever listens to this today, if it helps one person change their attitude and go from being a very angry person like I was to somebody who is now on a path to really appreciating life and being part of the solution as opposed to the part of the problem, then I'm doing my job. You know, I'm doing my job at making the world a better place, bettering the world in which we live, one attitude at a time. I hope it's more than that. I hope I get there quicker than that. But the reality is that's the mark that I want to leave on the world. If I can help somebody today smile tomorrow, as opposed to waking up angry, then we're doing our job.
Yeah, I mean that's a big thing in and of itself. That's a big thing as far as I'm concerned. I'm curious if you have a thought on this. What conversation aren't we having that we need to be having right now?
I don't think enough people are looking closely enough at how the media landscape, the political landscape, and social media specifically has affected our personal lives and our personal relationships. I think more people need to start having the conversation. Is it right to give my kid a cell phone at whatever age? That's a conversation that I think is not being had enough. In that the internet ecosystem that so much of our time is spent in now is not a friendly place, and I don't think it's been a net positive on society. This is where I make my living. But the reality is we need to have a much more serious conversation about when we start to expose our children to that internet ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's a worthy conversation. And I think, to your point, I mean, it is interesting because there is the very obvious positives, like you said, you're making your living on that ecosystem. I do to a degree as well. And you can point at a lot of good things, but there is the just broad impact on who we are as human beings and therefore as a society. I think everybody feels what you're talking about to a degree. It's like, and with kids, the challenge, it's interesting, right? You talk to a 20-year-old versus talking to a 50-year-old, and the 20-year-old knows nothing else, right? And
That's right.
And as a result, doesn't have the same perspective that a 50-year-old has. Is like, you can kind of remember, okay, well, it was like this. And so you can engage with it to at least to a degree with the knowledge of what came before and what good looked like before. But more and more, that's not going to be the case. So to your point, having the conversation so that people can be more active in where that goes, I think is huge, because it's going to just keep going, and it's going to be layered with newer things. But who do we want to be in the midst of that? That right. Feels like the crux of what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So I've asked you a bunch of questions. I'd love to give you a chance to flip it around and ask the audience a question. Do you have something you want to put to them?
Yeah. So we talked about it a little bit in the beginning of this, TJ. But when you think about the totality of your life, and you think about the 2,080 hours a year that you're putting into your job, I just want people to ask themselves, is this where I want to be? Is this where I am doing a couple things? Am I fulfilling the best? And we talked about janitors, we talked about truck drivers, we talked about corporate executives. There's no right or wrong answer, but the reality is you have to ask yourself, and I ask you, is that the place where you are going to fulfill the purpose that you have in life? It's the one place that you're going to spend probably more time than any other place in your life.
Yeah.
So just ask yourself that question. And then if you're not, is there a way for you in your mind to make that the place? Not leaving that, but making that the place. Because it's like I've told people before, just because you leave doesn't mean, wherever you go, there you are.
Right.
So is there a way for you to make, whether you're a janitor, a truck driver, a corporate executive, whatever it is there a way for you, because you're going to be the common denominator in every place you go, wherever you go, there you are. Is there a way to make that the most meaningful place that you can be to spend your working life?
Yeah.
And if not, start thinking about how you can either get there or find a place where you are there.
I love that. I love that view that it's, it could be that you need to change where you are, but it also look within and see, like, can I change how I think about it, how I view it, what I bring to this place so that it does connect to the bigger purpose? Yeah, I love that. If you could wave a magic wand and make the world of work completely desuckified, what does that world look like?
I think the best way to completely desuckify work, TJ, would be for every person to be able to go to whatever job it is that they have and know that the person they are reporting to is going to listen to them in a way that they will truly feel heard.
Yeah.
The workplace would change overnight if everybody's boss listened in a way that the people that report to them feel truly heard.
I am 1,000% on board with that. Sometimes it feels easier said than done in terms of like being that boss who really learns how to listen well. That is a honed skill, particularly when you're getting requests from 8,000 different directions and pressure on your time to, like, even when you have 5 minutes with one of the people that reports to you, to be fully present in that moment so that they feel that matters, but it isn't always easy. Yeah, I get it.
That's right.
Well, now it's time for something a little sillier. I think I mentioned to you previously, I do some sound effects on this show. I'll do some meows, meow, and that kind of stuff. And that you'll hear that at the beginning of some of the episodes. But I always invite the guests to chime in with something they've got. So what do you got for us? What kind of sound are you willing to make?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know if I could do this anymore, but my dad, who was a very interesting guy, died several years ago. But one of my favorite things to do, or one of our favorite things to do together, was to go hunting, and sometimes, it was just one of the goofiest things that he would do. But like if we're road hunting and we're not seeing anything and nothing's happening or whatever, my dad would. He would just bust out with, all of a sudden he'd just randomly roll down the window and just start going, and there's a whole bunch more to it than that, like a weird cheek thing. And
okay.
But
well, you very much did it, so I love it. Yeah, came through loud and clear. That's fun. I love stories like that. Those little moments that we remember, like with our folks and things like that like stick with us over the years. It's not always the heavy stuff, right? It's like the silly kind of, but that was the moment, right? That sticks with you. Yeah. That's awesome. That is definitely going to appear in the intro to our show. So, and just last thing I always want to ask is, where can people find out more about the work you're doing? How do they track you down online?
I'm a fairly easy guy to find. DerateTheHate.com is going to be the podcast website. You can find my blog there. You can get to all the socials there. And then braverangels.org is become part of the movement. This is literally one of the most important organizations that you'll ever be a part of. It's very easy to sign up. There's a lot of things that you can learn there. Become part of the movement to courageous citizenship, civic engagement. Let's bridge divides together. braverangels.org is going to be where I would encourage everybody to go.
Yeah, I will definitely point people to that. And it's funny when you mentioned that. I was looking through some of your shares on LinkedIn over the last week or month or two. And you shared something from someone who I know. I don't know her in person, but I know her through LinkedIn. Her name's Sarah Rosinski. She works in the advertising world, but she shared a post about going to some of your Braver Angels events. I think she's in Colorado. And I was like, first of all, it was a weird little 6 degrees of separation because she's, somebody I'm connected to in that world, and then you. But she had a really beautiful piece that she wrote about, her own experience of feeling like there was a sort of a release of stepping into some of those meetings and finally being able to speak in a way where you can feel heard, not feel like you're crowing crazy, and feel like there are others who are craving what many of us, I think, are craving right now, which is just simply the ability to both speak freely and to listen and hear others freely and share in the generosity of that. So I definitely encourage it. Her piece plus this conversation has motivated me to check it out. I'm going to try to find either a local event here in the Phoenix area or pop online for something here in the next couple of weeks, because I love what you guys are doing. I think it's great.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, TJ, for having me on. I'm truly grateful, and keep up the great work that you're doing. And God bless.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you, Will. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork podcast. And a huge thanks to Wilk for bringing purpose and passion to the show. You can follow Wilk on LinkedIn and check out DerateTheHate.com to learn more about his work and check out his podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to help your teams bring their absolute best to work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. Type meow in the calendar invite, and I'll also send you a free DesuckifyWork t-shirt. Bye, everyone.